Welcome to Downward Dogma, a podcast that explores and challenges today's authority system. Join us as we discuss the ingredients and functionality of our current framework and explore some possible solutions. Prepare to have your awareness of today's political terrain expanded. And now, your hostesses, Jennie, Tasha, and Sarah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Downward Dogma. You're here with myself, Jennie McDaniel. We have the lovely Tasha Bell. How are you doing, Tasha?
Doing great, thank you.
Wonderful. And we have the lovely Sarah Murphy. How are you, Sarah?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Wonderful. Our show title today is Values Level Thinking, and I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, and she's going to start us off on the conversation.
Thanks. I am actually really kind of new to this, but I thought it was so impactful when I kind of stumbled upon it when a friend of mine sent it to me, that it was worth kind of just talking about and hashing out. And so apparently values level thinking is something that is common in the coaching world. And I had the website that she sent me was by a woman named Catherine, and it doesn't really have much more information than that, but it talks about a values level model that's laid out by Dr. Claire W. Groves, who's a professor of psychology. And the quote that is kind of the end of the little intro I thought was really applicable to this particular podcast. It says, "I do suggest, however, that this I deeply believe is so, that for the overall welfare of total man's existence in the world over the long run of time, higher levels are better than lower levels, and that the prime good of any society's governing figures should be to promote human movement up the levels of human existence." Which, you know, obviously we talk a lot about governing figures and their responsibilities to the people, WS. And the values levels range from 1 to 8. And it basically, you can go up or down. There's probably one level you live at for as kind of like your baseline. But as you grow and evolve, you can certainly climb to a higher level. But in times of stress or maybe when you're not really thinking with all of your brain, but more with your lizard brain, you can digress down the values level. And so values level 1, for example, is focused on self and survival and having their own needs met, which isn't too far from kind of the triangle of needs, right? The hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm. Is that Maslow's or something?
Yeah, Maslow, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's very familiar, right? It's very similar. And then it goes all the way to level 8. And we can put the link to this in the show notes.
I did. I added that because this article was so descriptive and so wonderful that you sent over in that message. And I posted it on our Facebook, our show page, as well as I have it up in front of me in that Claire W. Graves. I loved that quote that you started off with, but I want to hand it back over to you. Yes, I love the article.
Yeah, so it goes all the way to levels 8, where it talks about the individual thinks and acts globally, which makes sense. You know, if you're kind of at the base of awareness or existence, like you're just trying to survive. Whereas once you've reached level 8, which I guess if you were looking at the triangle, all of your basic needs are met. It says the individual thinks and acts globally. They are seeking spirituality and to unify living systems while recognizing the possible need to sacrifice self and others as may be required for the overall survival of life. At this values level, the individual seeks to end disease, war, poverty, hunger, and political oppression. And of course, most people are somewhere in between there, right? I would assume not too many people are at level 8 where you're self-sacrificing for the value of others, although I do feel like that people dip a toe in that quite frequently, especially if you're talking about, you know, what are the common buzzwords that the political systems use, like redistribution of wealth, for example. I personally am on the scale that, like, I don't need $1 billion. So, like, I may be at the point where I'm making $1 million a year, but, if I don't need it all, then I'm going to use it to, put into systems and programs where it is needed. But not everyone's at that level, obviously, which is why we have billionaires in the world.
Mm-hmm. And very, very few of them, and they've been gaining. I've been seeing articles about the wealth they've been gaining over the last couple of weeks while millions go unemployed, but that's a whole other show. I love looking at these levels because I can see different parts of my life being at different levels. When I was in my 20s, I was maybe at level 4. And then as I got older and started to gain some more independence in my individuality, I went up to level 5. And I can even see these levels in decades where, you get the one that's level 4, submissive and following a fixed plan. Well, that was maybe the 40s and 50s.
Right.
You really had a nice handle on capitalism, looking forward to a betterment and movement. And then you have the 60s coming in at level 5, where there's a strong personal drive, and they want to develop more of that individuality. And so this was a fascinating article. Go to our show page. You'll not only see the link to our Facebook page, but you'll also see the link to this article. And I really think that it'll help you wrap your head around it. They write it well, and the person doing the research, I think, was very solid and knowledgeable. So our leaders, we want them at a 7, 8. They're sitting around a 2, 3. So we got work to do.
and one of the other things I really loved about this is if you familiarize yourself with the levels, and I guess this is why it's very common in coaching, is that you can very easily, just based on the language that they use, you can very easily determine which of the values levels they're embodying, which allows you to tailor your approach to that person, right? So if you know what drives them, if you know what, where their kind of values are, when you're talking to them, you're more likely to communicate with them if you speak to their level, for lack of a better term, right? Like if you speak to their level, you'll be more impactful than if you're sitting around talking values 8, like let's redistribute the wealth, and they're sitting at a value 2, where they're tribal and they follow a strong and dominant leader who says that you don't want people to redistribute wealth because that belongs to you and you need it to be safe and secure, then you're never going to reach them because they're 6 levels below you and you have different values. Even though ultimately you may want the same things, you can't get there unless you kind of align your values in how you communicate.
It's brilliant. And I'm betting that life coaches can use this, parents can use this, business owners with employees can use this, and I'm imagining teachers on some level use this too, since you have such an array of different students per classroom who come from different backgrounds, different financial situations. So anyone who's a human would do well by understanding these value levels, and it helps us to widen our understanding. Hey, there are other levels. Not everyone thinks the same. Imagine that. So just that in itself is helpful.
Right.
Tasha, you want to add anything in there?
I thought it was interesting how much it resembled zodiac signs to me. That's what it reminded me of as I was reading through it, like different levels of the zodiac and your different signs and archetypes in that direction.
Fascinating. Did you see each value level as a different zodiac sign, or did you see them kind of clumped together in levels?
More like it would be like one was starting out as Aries and then kind of go through the different zodiacs. That's kind of how I was reading it. I had a hard time trying to wrap my mind around how that would really be beneficial in the circumstance of coaching and things like that. But I thought it was really interesting. There's so many different ways to go through psychology.
Yeah, and I think I used this level system without even knowing there was a name for it. And I do that with each and every one of my clients. A lot of my clients are similar. We have very similar understandings and what have you, but not everyone's at the same terminology or vocabulary or level or functionality. So I have to kind of move my levels around for her client. Like if I take Tasha on a shamanic journey, it's really like she's taking me because she goes far out. If I'm taking somebody who's new to shamanic journeys, I'm guiding them. So I just let flow whatever needs to flow. And I never really put like a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on it. I just kind of put a feeling or sense, but I am a clairsentient, so I'm going to resonate with the feelings of it more. But if I'm talking to a 6-year-old, I might speak a certain language. And if I'm talking to a 25-year-old, it'll change. And then a 50-year-old, it'll change. Certainly not going to, unless the parents suggest I do, talk to a 6-year-old about the fact that there's no such thing as time. If their parents think that they can handle that, wonderful, but it might confuse them too much and it might not be beneficial. So again, that might be great for a 25-year-old, 26-year-old to expand their understanding, but maybe not a 6-year-old. And again, that's debatable. Some 6-year-olds will flip your head back. And Sarah, would you use, when you're dealing with employees and an organization and business, would you just naturally use these value levels, or did you have to study it to get your head wrapped around it?
Well, like I said, this values level kind of laid out like this is new to me. But I think inherently there's a whole bunch of buzzwords around kind of leadership development wherein we talk about, meeting them where they're at, or different things motivate different people. And there is no like one size fits all, system to getting a performance out of your employees, right? And I think this actually explains kind of why there is no one, not that there aren't other, reasons, but people are coming from different places. And so some of that's generational. I mean, certainly if you want to look at generations and kind of how they were brought up and what their work ethics were kind of pounded into them, the generation, the baby boomers, and certainly their parents were very much of the mindset where you don't even have to like your job, you just have to work. Like you need to make money so you can pay your bills, so you can pay your taxes, so you can buy that house with the white picket fence and the 2 cars and have your 2.5 kids, and then you can buy the RV and you can have your 2 weeks vacation every year, and you will basically be set, and that's the American dream, and that's what you need to be working towards. And so, they got these jobs that had, retirements and pensions, and they worked for 35 years doing the same thing every day, wearing the same tie and a brown suit. And that was happiness, right? And then you see Generation X, which is kind of my generation. I'm actually considered a millennial. I'm an 82, but
cusp. Yep.
Yeah, I've been on that cusp, and I resonate. Like my first email address is a senior in high school, so like I hand wrote a lot of my essays. So for me, while I have that work ethic where it's like you pay your dues even if you're making minimum wage because you know that you're going to work your way up that ladder, it also comes with a little bit of but I'm not going to necessarily grind away for this guy all my life, because, I can see that I have the ability to step outside that and do it for myself. Whereas the millennials, you see a lot of what their kind of values are less about security. And I say millennials, and let's recognize that they range all the way up to like 39, 40, right? Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about new to the workforce. Nope. But this is this generation of, working moms who are doing this, 50, 60-hour work week, but they're also, raising the 2.5, 3 children. Actually, it's more around 2, I think, on average now. And then they have a side hustle. Maybe they're, selling something on Etsy, or they've got their, MLM, leggings or whatever it is. They're doing things on the side, not just because maybe their full-time job doesn't cover all of those desired expenses, although let's be clear, like you cannot work a single income family of 4 any longer and, have a stay-at-home mom. That's not possible. So the dreams of kind of the baby boomers are no longer. And so they have to hustle a little bit harder, but they also do it because it's a way for them to express themselves when they're not in doing work for other people. But in the in the flip side of that, when they are working for other people, they demand more of their employers. It's no